Thank you, Sharon. If you'll join with me in prayer, please. Jesus, you know what it's like to live in a world of scarcity and fear. And you yourself show us the way to abundance and to grace. As we turn to your word today, inspire my words and stir within our hearts and our minds. Help us to see your presence in the ordinary, to trust in your provision, and to live as a people shaped by your abundant love. Without you, we are lost. With you, we are transformed. Amen. I'm probably not going out on a limb to think that many of us have ever found ourselves in situations where there just wasn't enough. Whether it wasn't enough food to go around, or not enough time to do everything you wanted to do, or maybe it was a lack of something else, a lack of love or patience or hope. It can feel at sometimes like an empty or exhausting place. I can remember a time or two in my life where scarcity made me do things that maybe hurt ourselves and others. I wasn't joking with the kids when I told you that I would fight my brother to the death for something. And my mom was really smart, teaching us to cut those things perfectly in half. But of course, the battles between my brother and I over what was a scarce treat was really not as much about the treat as it was maybe something larger, right? Maybe that singular cookie symbolized everything we feared we lacked, like love or attention or recognition or something else, a therapist might say. But that fight for a cookie, it really was just a fight over scarcity. We both acted like it was the last one on earth, though of course we knew that wasn't true. But in those moments, my brother and I found it real easy to give in to the fear that there wasn't enough to go around. And we let that fear shape our behavior, tearing apart our relationships sometimes over something so small. Well, that's what scarcity can do, right? It can lead us to behave in ways that we later regret. It leads us to hoarding resources, overcompensating for things we lack, harming others in the process if needed. The fear that comes with scarcity is a powerful force. Scarcity makes us feel like there isn't enough to go around, so we have to fight for our little piece of whatever it is. But as we see in today's text, Jesus' first miracle, at least according to the Gospel of John, kind of challenges this whole idea of scarcity. Jesus doesn't just solve a problem of embarrassment. He actually transforms the whole situation into abundance. When we begin to live with an abundance mindset, trusting God's provision and grace, we see that there's always enough. But it doesn't feel that way sometimes. It just feels like scarcity is everywhere. We hear it in the language of politics and economics and social issues. Even in the Bible, we open Genesis 1. There's not enough knowledge of good and evil to go around, so Adam and Eve, they fight for it. Not enough honor for an offering as we change the page to Genesis 3, and Cain kills Abel. This is a tale as old as time. It isn't just us in this moment. And marketers and media, they like scarcity. Oh, it works really good to get us to buy stuff. Whenever we feel there's not enough of something, there's always a chance to buy or manipulate or hoard, making sure we get our share, even if it means stepping on someone else to get there. We know the headlines about food insecurity and how it happens not just in faraway places with emaciated children, even in our own communities. People grow hungry, and yet we overproduce food we don't even need. We waste it at an alarming rate. And somehow the abundance we do have still doesn't seem like enough. Love, time, when we don't feel we have enough love, we overcompensate through unhealthy relationships or pursuing something that leaves us empty inside. And we end up neglecting the people that really matter. All because we feel like we have to secure our place, or our future, or our value. Scarcity mindset can spread like wildfire and spread dysfunction and hurt at the same time. We see the same problem in the way we respond to fear in society. If we feel our safety is compromised, we build walls and put up barriers, sometimes against those who need help the most. We fear the loss of security, so we let fear shape laws or choices or relationships, and we forget that Jesus is standing here calling us to live from a place of abundance, not fear. A few years ago, I read a story about a small community that was devastated by a flood. They were kind of cut off from rescuers for a few days. They had to bring in the Army Corps of Engineers. It is a similar story to what was happening earlier this year in places like Asheville, but this was a few years ago. They had limited food and resources and no electricity. In this little community, they could have made it if they just pooled their stuff together, cook all the meat that was spoiling in their freezers anyway, and share it with each other. Some people thought that they could do that, and there was enough for them, and some people let it go to waste, just because they were worried they wouldn't have enough. Things didn't get too dire, but it could have been a really big party. All of it a stark reminder of the difference between scarcity and abundance. Jesus, in today's story, is right with us, right? And we can see abundance breaking through. That situation's simple enough. The wedding feast is running out of wine, and these were big multi-day parties. And Jesus was there with some of his family members, including his mother Mary, and Mary notices the problem. And of course, if they would have run out of wine, it would have been not just a minor inconvenience, it would have been a major embarrassment for this family. So Mary, feeling compassion and seeing the situation, turns to Jesus for help. She knows he's capable of doing something about this situation. Initially, Jesus hesitates, responding to his mother, "Mom, you're embarrassing me," which gets translated, "My hour has not yet come." But Mary, knowing who Jesus is, turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." And Jesus, at Mary's request, orders those 6 stone jars, somewhere between 20 and 30 gallons each, the ones that are used for ceremonial washing, that they be filled with water. And he turns that water into wine. Good wine. Not just good wine. The best wine. And that's something remarkable about this miracle. It's not that just Jesus performed it, but did so with a sense of abundance. He could have brought boxed wine into those jars, but he brought the best wine. And there was no shortage. Jesus doesn't make just enough wine to cover the shortfall. He makes more than they can even drink. It's an act of grace. And it's a sign of God's abundant provision. This, of course, is the essence of God's grace. It's abundant. It overflows. It's more than we could ever ask for or imagine or even consume if we wanted it to. And in this moment, early in the gospel, Jesus reveals that he is the source of this grace, calling us and all who hear the story to trust in the abundance that God provides. As we consider Jesus' abundant grace, we're invited to live out of that same abundance. Just as Jesus transformed a simple moment at a wedding into something extraordinary, we're called to transform our everyday lives through the abundance of God's grace that is freely available to all of us. I mean, take a moment and think about the gift of communion. Every time we gather here at the table, we're reminded that there is enough. There's always enough grace. There's always enough love. There's always enough forgiveness. And it doesn't matter how many people gather, there's always enough. It's a profound symbol of God's abundance, that Jesus keeps inviting us to the table, so a table that never, ever runs out. When we live with an abundance mindset, it starts to change how we view the world. We're less tempted to hoard things for ourselves and more empowered to share. We start to stop overcompensating and start to offer love freely and to receive it in return. We stop living so much by fear and start trusting in God's grace, that there will always be enough. This is so countercultural and counter to our normal experiences, right? We know that it's easy to not have enough. But as we share in the abundance that God offers, we become a living witness to the world that there is enough for all. That's why we support missions and give of ourselves. We know that the people in California, they'll be cared for. But the money that we're raising to help support wildfire victims there shows them that they're not alone, that there is enough to go around. One of the most beautiful things about living in abundance is that it's contagious. That's why GoFundMes go viral, right? People see some abundance and some need, and it keeps pouring out until it's filled. When we live with this abundant mindset, we inspire others to do the same. We create communities that end up being marked by generosity and kindness and love. We end up learning to make more space at the table, inviting them to also experience this overflowing grace of God. Jesus' first miracle at the wedding of Cana is not just about turning water into wine. It's a defining moment, one that reveals the nature of God's grace, that it's abundant, overflowing, and always enough. So as we move throughout our lives this week or this day or the rest of the year, we don't have to give in to the fear of scarcity. We can live boldly, trusting in God's provision and offering the same grace to others. And as we come to the communion table in a little bit, let us remember there's always enough. As Jesus speaks words of transformation, and in Jesus' words, we experience the abundance of God's grace in our lives, that there's always enough to be renewed, restored, and loved, and to be sent out into the world with hope and grace. Let us live from that abundance and trust that God's grace will always carry us through. Amen.